There's no such thing as a bad story. They just have bad storytellers. The stories that land the best are the ones someone wants to tell you. The newsroom is basically an assembly line to a story.
If you're going to build a newsroom within your organization, it's going to look a lot different. Kind of see who are the characters in this and how do we adapt that to the corporate environment.
Ask thoughtful questions. Don't show up and ask the same questions or the marketing speak or the product speak. Ask better questions. Challenge yourself to get 5 layers deeper.
Sometimes asking the right questions, you uncover a story that you didn't even intend to find. It's actually easier for you to be yourself in an interview than it is to be anyone else.
Welcome back to Owned and Earned. I'm your host, Sarah Smith, and I'm with
Ray Smith
and
Hattie D. Jamal.
I told you she was coming back. I know you guys are as thrilled as
Ain't get rid of me now.
No, stuck with her.
Yeah.
She's in the fam. Okay, so we talked about so much on our last episode, but one of the hugest shifts that we all kind of see happening is one, this content style where you're putting it out and it's just for people to find. There's no interaction.
Yeah.
We always get a lot of comments and questions about going live and what that's like. And I can't think of anyone better to talk to about that than someone who's used to going live all the time with your background, Hattie. So that's kind of what we're talking about this episode, thinking like a newsroom. So to kick us off here, Hattie, you left off with, in our last episode, talking about how important it is to hire a journalist. But there is a foundation here to the way a newsroom operates that I think could be insightful for other marketing teams and organizations as they're looking to build this internally. So talk to me a little bit about how a newsroom operates, where you see overlap initially that other organizations could embody.
Yeah, I mean, so the newsroom is basically an assembly line to a story, right? And so what you have is what I consider the nucleus, which is your news desk. You have your assignment editors, and those people have their ear to the ground all day long, right? And they are the verification side of it too. So for instance, in a newsroom, you'll have assignment editors who, and this might not be commonplace anymore, but when I was an assignment editor, you have police scanners running in the background. You're online all day sifting through thousands of emails from PR agents, press releases, the local communities. So you have people that are just sending you potential story ideas. You're also following things that are happening locally and different people. You're always scanning for a story out there somewhere. And at the same time, when something comes in or something breaks, you are the first line of defense to ensure that everything is verified because you don't want to falsely report anything, right? And if you don't have any more information, we just say that. So like as an assignment editor, I literally would not wish that upon my worst enemy to be an assignment editor. They are a different kind of breed of people. And I think they're also often overlooked when people think about pitching the media. They think, oh, we need to get to the producer or a reporter. And I'm like, your assignment editor is the quiet hero behind it all. That's literally, they are traffic control. They're also assigning these stories. They're working with producers. The OG kind of assignment editors, the ones that have been in it for a long time, they have keen news judgment. I mean, and it's one of the reasons why I'm so big on like, you need to hire a journalist. I mean, when you have an assignment editor, you put somebody like that and you match that with your data team or your research team, your analytics team, you're going to extract some major insight because they understand they have this muscle that can turn basic insights into an immediate story. They see the common thread. They see the patterns. They're really good at making sure things align when you put facts side by side to kind of go, something's not adding up here, or where are we short? They're also really great at thinking ahead. So you have your news desk, which essentially is like finding stories, right? The producer team is the one, like you have your producers, and essentially what you're doing is you have a pitch meeting, depending on, of course, whether it's like local news, depending on the media, but you have a pitch meeting. This pitch meeting is one where everybody's coming in kind of with their story, with their headlines, what they think is happening, like what they want to talk about or stories that they're working on, right? And there's a collective, cohesive conversation where people are adding in. My favorite thing is a pitch meeting, you know, because there's such an exchange of ideas, and you have a room full of what always it's a brilliant minds coming together, right? And just sharing these ideas and you getting feedback and having real conversations, and stories develop in that room, right? So sometimes you can literally have something that was it was a nothing. It was an event that took place that, hey, I saw something on the corner of downtown in Houston today where like there was like all these pop-ups and stuff. And it's like, I've noticed this, that, and the other, and boom, next thing you know, you have a hard-hitting headline around something that is around the community, right?
Yeah.
The producer's job is to take the story and find the best way to formulate it, stack it, and put it and bring it forward, right? Where they're the ones that take it into the creation and distribute it. Obviously, you know, you have your editors, huge roles there, photographers, which we call them photogs, but most people outside of that it's videographers. It's rare to actually have a photographic journalist these days. I mean, that's still a thing and it's huge, but usually when we say photog in the newsroom, we're talking about a videographer. And they understand the best shots to get. They know they have an eye for where the story actually is visually, that I think a lot of people don't understand how important that is, because it's not just point and shoot, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
A true photog, and this is where I think all of these roles translate into brand DNA, right? Because if you have a videographer that understands where I can see the story, where the best visual is, that plays such a key role, right? Like now we're not just pointing and shooting, or you know what, this shot would look better if you guys did this, or what if you stood over there, or, you know, people talk about what a stand-up is, like when a reporter does like that first intro or whatever, and finding creative ways to do that. And that brings me to the talent, right? Because a lot of people in this drives me nuts. Everyone thinks that on-camera talent is just that. Like you're either just a talking head, you're just there reporting this, you might write some stories, you read a teleprompter, and it is nowhere near what it is. Because it's funny, the newsroom is the only space where almost everybody can do everybody's job. If granted, I don't like, there's assignment editors, they're assignment editors for a reason. They don't want to be on camera. They like what they do, right? But if you tell an assignment editor, we're short, we need you to go up there, they're going to be like, all right, it ain't going to be Emmy worthy, but I'll do it. You know what I mean? And there was one assignment editor I always remember, his name's John, phenomenal guy, been in the game for a long time. He could do it. It's not what he likes to do, but he can step into it. And I think that is the one thing that corporate does not have. It does not have the versatility that it's like, you're not going to take a salesperson and just throw them into PR and vice versa. Everyone's very siloed. Whereas a newsroom does not function like that. A newsroom is one huge ecosystem where everybody has a definitive role towards one objective. And I think that culture can really serve a purpose in a corporate landscape if you can adopt this mentality and integrate it, right? Especially if that shared mission is also centered around storytelling. And I think corporations, brands severely undervalue the valuable stories that they harbor, right? Whether it's in their data, whether it's in their community, employees, what have you. That newsroom functionality is extremely high paced. It's very fast. It's a treadmill that's on 10 all day, every day. It doesn't turn off. And so there's this constant relay. Whereas I think that framework, when brought into a corporate world, does so well because it slows it down.
Yeah.
And it anchors it. And then you have a full functioning kind of ecosystem where you kind of create this cohesive communication channel that extracts everything out of the brand and then brings it forward.
Yeah, and it kind of leans to, you know, what I had mentioned the first episode that we talked, which was about creating that like systemic way and that structured, reoccurring way in which you're doing this consistently. Ray, you've built Speaker Box. There's a lot of components to the agency that you built that way, kind of on the foundation of great journalism. But there's also, I think, some insights you've shared with other marketers who kind of come to you and kind of asked for your experience in doing this. So tell me a little bit about how you think this methodology or thinking like a journalist, hiring a journalist can really help marketers who are trying to figure out how to stand out?
Yeah, so if you're going to build a newsroom in your organization, it's going to look a lot different from a post-production kind of house that most companies have, but they don't even know they have, right? So if you're moving into a real-time environment, some things are going to change. So I'm listening here to Hattie right now to kind of see who are the characters in this and how do we adapt that to the corporate environment. And Hattie, it sounds like to me where I'm trying to kind of piece together where a journalist, if you were to hire one, would fit into this organization or this reorg that you do. And it sounds to me like they might be the assignment editor would probably be your journalist or marketing manager, it sounds like. And then maybe, I love the idea of a pitch meeting. That's pivotal. But I think your SMEs, along with some of your marketing team, would be in that pitch meeting.
Yeah.
Pitching content, pitching
Yeah.
story.
The way that I look at it is the journalist that you would bring onto your team in creating that internal newsroom. And I think some people usually feel PR is synonymous with journalism. And the way I say it is that they're cousins, they're not siblings, right? And so when you can bring a journalist in, that journalist can empower the current PR department, right? Because your PR is your distribution.
Yeah.
And so if you had a journalist, essentially what they could serve as is your managing editor, or you want to call them chief storyteller or what have you, but they need a seat with the C-suite at the execs at a bird's eye view of the company. And what they then, if I were to structure it, what I would do is have this person be the head of kind of the newsroom in the sense that they call this pitch meeting and in a reverse pitch meeting, because they're essentially extracting the stories out of each department. What's happening with the engineering department? What's happening in PR? What's happening in social, sales, marketing? And the one thing journalists are fantastic at is knowing who the source, cultivating your list of sources, right? They know who to go to get the answer they need. And because they know how to ask the right questions, they can extract what they need in order to get to the story they want to get to, right? Sometimes asking the right questions, you uncover a story that you didn't even intend to find.
Yeah.
So it's centering the journalist as kind of like the key liaison that not only pulls the story, they have the ability to verify it and kind of create like an assembly communication line between what's happening. They would serve as that synergistic point, contact point that helps PR and social drive their objective home, whether it's for an owned objective or earned objective. They're able to kind of like do what a journalist does best, which is basically wear all the hats.
Yes.
They can be the assignment editor, the producer, the talent. They can play all of these roles. And of course, every journalist also has their different specialty, right? So like knowing how to utilize that is, to me, I look at it a lot like journalists are kind of like AI. It's only as good as you know how to implement it into your strategy or your work. So if you have a journalist, for instance, like as an on-camera journalist, if you know that that's what they have, then you know for a fact that they're going to be fantastic at empowering your sales team during presentations.
Yeah.
They're going to be fantastic at helping them tell better stories and presenting those stories in a way that's engaging to their prospective clients. And then even when it comes to marketing and understanding the best ways to extract things that make sense, because a lot of times marketers do a fantastic job of bringing like something that is valuable information, but the messaging isn't simplified enough. It's still in that either corporate speak or it doesn't have the heart it needs to capture your attention, right? Or understanding how to take something and turning it into a very, which I hate to use the word clickbait, but like it's a clickable headline that you're like, I want to know what this is, even though this has nothing to do with me. I'm just interested in it, right? And that's what journalists are trained to do. It's in our instinct, right? And when we can hear something that somebody else hears as just a normal data set, and we hear it and we're like, wait a minute, back up. Why is that there? Why does that happen? And digging in a little deeper, and usually you come up with this whole story that comes out of that you would never think of.
Yeah, 100%. Like you have this kind of dream team trifecta, if you really think about it, between like a journalist who might sit as like your head of communications,
Yeah.
right? Who then leads like your PR or leads like your helps with your social, and then you have like a head of content who leads like the multimedia side of that. How does this get out? How are we visually taking that to buy? And then you have your CMO or your digital marketer who is like, I'm the data. I know the data of this. I know the product of this. I know what our buyer is so deeply. I'm an expert on that. And like this synergistic kind of trifecta between those three seems magical for sure.
Yeah.
So, I know when it comes to what we do on the podcasting side, by the time like a client has come to us, one of the biggest hurdles they're faced with is you have these SMEs who are so freaking good at what they do. They are experts. They've been doing it for 20 years. You get them to talking on that thing and you can't shut them up. However, they don't have like that level of media training that really lends to video or what we feel like that charisma that sometimes people crave in content. So that's a area that marketers always come, hey, I've got, Steve from sales and I've got, Bob or Sarah from engineering, but they're not the warmest or they're not the. So tell me a little bit about how you work with executives to like help elicit that. And what would you say to the person who's like, not everybody can be on camera or not everybody has a great story or can't story tell well?
Yeah. So, and I always say this, and I think I've said this in more than one place, and I hope it eventually becomes associated with me everywhere, because the one thing I always say is like, there's no such thing as a bad story. They just have bad storytellers, right? And so when you have a bad storyteller, all you really have is someone who hasn't found something that they're passionate about telling you yet, right? The stories that land the best are the ones driven from a true place of emotion. It's something someone wants to tell you. That's the first component that makes a story engaging, is the person who's telling you the story wants to tell it. If they're there going, well, yeah, and this feels like this person's on the witness stand. You know what I mean? Like, and you never want it to feel that way. The biggest thing I always tell people is you gotta find one, their trigger point of passion, right? You want to find out what is it specifically, because no engineer is the same. There's similarities, but there's no engineer is the same. There's something specific that speaks to one person, that this engineer, or something that opens them up, right? And sometimes it takes a matter of finding that. And the one thing I think every journalist is literally trained to do is getting under, like, warming someone up very quickly to the point where they want to have that conversation. They're engaged in that conversation and bringing that out of somebody. And the other thing that I realize is some people feel the need to like adjust the volume on people's personality. Like, for instance, I don't know if you guys remember the old dry eyes, that commercial. That guy was intentionally dry.
He was
like
dry.
He was as dry as the eyes he was talking about,
Right.
right? And so that lent itself into being a part of who he is. So whatever someone is, let them lean into that. The thing is to double down. Don't resist who you are, right? If you are reserved and quiet and even a little awkward, then by all means, double down on that, because then it turns into an endearing quality or a memorable one. Or it's something that everyone just kind of goes, that's what I can expect when I get this person, right?
Yeah.
And what tends to happen is you get people who their natural energy level is a little more grounded, and that's okay. That if whatever you're requiring does maybe for whatever reason require more energy, then it's up to you on the outside to offset that and create balance. Now, whether that comes with adding another personality to kind of balance, or whether that means what I love to say, fix it in post. Give me the type of framing around this person that brings so like funny things to them. Does that make sense? Because you can turn anybody into something very entertaining to watch if you know how to complement their personality well.
Yeah, that's big for me. Someone who I would say is a little bit more reserved is I'm not very good at doing something that I don't feel is authentic. If I don't feel like it's authentic, then like everything in me just shuts down and I'm just like, I'm out.
Yeah.
So I always tell a story of like when I was a kid, like I was tossed into this speech therapy class. I literally had to ride the short bus to the hospital, like at noon every day while other kids stayed in class. So
wait, what? And this was because you weren't talking?
I just wasn't talking. I was just not responding anything, just kind of like mute, you know?
I got you. Yeah.
So they take me to this class. They're showing me all these cards and trying to get me to talk. And I'm just not talking. And this goes on for 3 months. And then finally they pulled out one of my favorite childhood characters, which was Thomas the Tank Engine. And I just could not shut up. And I was literally kicked out of the program the next day. But I learned something early on is about myself and about other people who are kind of like me is like, I have to be engaged with the topic at hand.
Yeah.
And I also have to be authentically communicating.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't acting when I was talking about Thomas the Tank Engine. That was real enthusiasm.
Yeah.
So I see oftentimes, and I feel like sometimes this does come from producers, even like myself, that are trying to drive people's energy, trying to drive them to do something that is not natural to them. And you get something that's even more unnatural.
Oh,
and so then that person is kind of lost, like, okay, what do you want me to say? What do you want me to do?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and that's what we see a lot of the times in these organizations that we go into. It's just like, just what do you want me to say? What do you want me to do? Because you don't want me to be myself. And when
Yeah.
a person can't be themselves, then who can they be? They're kind of like lost.
yeah.
So we see that so often what we call the hot seat when you're sitting in front of the camera and everyone's looking at you. The pressure is, I want to get out of this situation. So who do I have to become to get out of this situation? Rather than meeting that team, rallying around that person and saying, how do we meet this person where they are and most comfortable so that we can extract what it is that we want? You know, and
Yeah.
you see that in news broadcasts very often. They're not coaching and, you know, coercing people to do something and it comes out great.
Yeah.
Even with all the little quirks, it makes it real, makes it feel authentic. The stumbles, you know, the stutters, all of that stuff is great.
Yeah, I think having being behind the camera as a producer too on the podcast side, it's like having a pulse that's how that feels to that person is really important. The fact that it comes so easy for so-and-so to smile or come with so much energy, and for the other person that feels like them dialing it up 20 points.
Yeah.
Like having that perspective, I think as a host or as a journalist or as an interviewer is so important. And I always like to say, like, you know, your version of just like they have a story to tell, but they're bad at telling stories, maybe.
Yeah.
You have the wrong storyteller. Mine is like, ask better questions.
Yes.
Like, ask thoughtful questions. Don't show up and ask the same questions or the marketing speak or the product speak. Ask better questions. Challenge yourself to get 5 layers deeper. And what you'll see, oftentimes we get that like, oh my gosh, I've never told that story before. Like, how did you get it out of me? And it's like, well, I just cared to ask 5 layers deeper than most people do. And you do have to have a capacity for that. But I think that's one of the areas where journalists and producers and why you would look to somebody who's external to the organization to maybe do that.
Yeah.
So speaking like looking external to the organization, if you today are, you know, someone's listening to this and they're like, okay, cool, I want to think like a newsroom. I want to build a newsroom. There's infrastructure required to do that. So let's kind of dial into that, like from the people to the systems to the rooms. Like what is like the infrastructure? Where do you start with the infrastructure of building a newsroom internally? Like after you've identified this is what you want to do, this is a good idea, maybe I'm going to get my key players. Like how do I start to get this off the ground?
Yeah, I mean, it's always great to have a production pipeline in a sense that, like I told you, like the newsroom is an assembly line for a story, right? So you have to create your assembly line so that it becomes a relay of, you have a system. One, you have to have a way to mine stories constantly because it's got to be consistently moving, right? So you can't have a drop off. So what functionality or who or what will be serving as where your stories are being mined from. Because then what happens is you create this whole bank. You're not gonna be able to produce all these at once. So what happens is you start creating true content and then within that, you have to have from mining it, you have to have a story filtration that goes, okay, this is something that needs to get out now. This is something that we can keep and put in whenever we want, right? You also want to have, and a lot of this is already kind of in place through siloed departments where you have like, for instance, social media has its content calendar. PR typically will team up with social media to kind of align things, for promote things and stuff like that. But when you think of it as a whole media, like thinking of creating a media hub and network, right, around and absorbing both of those things and going, okay, how do we tie our things together? You want to be able to find your stories, then you want to be able to filter your stories, know when they're going where, obviously what they're timing with what. And then you also need to have a verification, like quality control filter before anything. Like we talked before, a story hits air, it's been seen by 4 or 5 people sometimes. Now, to be fair, because I know a lot of people have probably seen things on like a local media where like, I've seen them mess up on this and that. I'm like, granted, the smaller the market, the smaller your team. The smaller your team, like the less eyes that you got going on, you got people doing more jobs where instead of, you have each person assigned to one thing. Larger markets, you have a reporter, a photographer, an editor, a design person. Whereas you go to, some markets and some smaller markets where you have what they call a multimedia journalist, where essentially that's a fancy word for you do everything. Yes. You shoot it, you edit it, you write it, you find it, all of it. You're the whole team. And when you have the resources you do in a corporate environment that you typically wouldn't in a newsroom, it empowers it to be a really strong source, right? You empower yourself for a really great and strong system. And so once you have that then it's about distribution, right? Like once we take it from concept to creation, and then obviously creating the actual production pipeline of like once you've gotten the stories out, right? And if you have a lot of subject matter experts, it helps to literally create your kind of like, you need to organize your content hubs for franchises or whatever for your different channels. So the way you think of a newsroom, where in a TV sense, you have your traditional broadcast, that's the chunk of everything. And then you have digital, which now obviously the landscape's changed, but traditionally you have broadcast, which was top, and then that broadcast funnels into your digital platforms, right? Now, granted, because we've had the shift in our media landscape, digital has taken prominence. So you want a lot more original digital content. But for a corporate landscape, you want to think of like, there's got to be a main hub, whether that's your large broadcast, which is your podcast or your YouTube channel, or the thing that gives me the big show, the big chunks. And then there's distribution through all of your platforms. Those are your channels, right? So whether that's social, and then understanding what things, organizing it into certain things. Like for instance, in a newsroom, just in a broadcast station in general, you have news, which then within news, there's breaking, something we got to tell right now. That's priority top. Then you have evergreen content, which this is something that you can do. There's lifestyle, where if you talk about the feature stories, the lighter stories, the creative type content. But when you can create actual content hubs, franchises, it creates a funneling system. And wherever you can create kind of a plug and play type situation, it eliminates having to go through the whole ideation process from scratch every single time. What do we do now? What do we write about now? What's the next thing now? If identifying your pillars of knowledge or information, right? So we are a company that, let's say you're a debt consolidation company. Well, you have data points on a lot of financial components, right? So we're gonna bring the latest data on this subset or this subject. That creates a content franchise, a funnel that's uniquely through your brand voice that you can pump out regularly, and then you know who you can go to within that. You're able to identify your subject matter experts in all these different arenas, right? Those serve as your talent, your reporters, the face of what it is. And I'm trying to think of what else would be left at that point.
I mean, that was really comprehensive.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean,
end to
there's
end.
so much to it.
And there's so much overlap when you think about like how a marketing department works inside of a company.
It is.
Like,
It is. There's so many parallels here. As I think about like the actual infrastructure, I think I would love to see more news desk inside of organizations. That means you're able to have a real-time environment that you can just go in, sit down with no technical personnel and be able to just record content.
Yeah.
We got to get there, because where I see the workflow going is you sit down, you record that content live, it goes into the cloud, AI is going to chop up your clips, you're going to have all of that stuff ready. Now, what that means is your post-production process now becomes more pre-production and production, and you have to flip everything on its head. So, we probably spend 2 hours, 2 to 3, maybe even 4 hours setting up a set each time. That has to move to zero.
yeah.
You have to be able to walk in, flip on a switch. So even the newsrooms we're designing for organizations right now, guy just came in here yesterday. He's up in 20 seconds recording his content. He flips 2 switches and he's recording. So that type of environment has to exist within organizations, even at your executives' homes and things like that, to where they can sit down. They don't have to do a lot of thinking, because when news breaks, you got to be able to sit down and get that content out. Also, they're not professional. They're not media professionals.
Yeah.
Right. So they can't deal with all of these little issues and buttons and color grading and all of this stuff that you typically have to do on a set. They have to be able to sit down and go. So as you think about your environment, I mean, you could just start with one camera directly in front of you and have 2 people sit down and report on what's happening in your industry. Set up a clock and try to avoid editing. Get out of we're going to edit that in post, or we're going to do this in post-production. Even being a post house, I find more value in being prepared going in. So sitting around with your team and going over the bullet points of what you're talking about, so you don't just go in there and have all these side conversations and tangents and things like that and say, oh, they'll get it in post.
Yeah.
That's going away. So you have to get the media training. You have to train yourself up to be able to hold a conversation, get your point across concisely.
Yeah.
And be punctual in what you're saying, and being real time with your data and your insights.
Yeah, 100%. We talked a lot about like building trust, and that whole, the whole idea of keeping in mind that you are garnering someone's time and approaching like that cast prepared and conscious of, you're taking someone's time. Make sure that it is valuable for them. There are so many overlaps just with the framework that you gave for marketers. You talk about mining stories. It's like, there is no better place to mine stories than one inside your organization through all the layers of people who work on the product and have built the product from the bottom up. But then also sales and marketing is a gold mine for stories. Your customers, they do not care about your feelings. They will tell you exactly what's bothering them, what they need, but you have to have a way to elicit that from. You gave the suggestion box a couple episodes back, and it's like, yeah, where's your suggestion box? Hopefully not just in the bad Google review you just got, you know, but actually systemically creating that place where people can give you feedback. That is like a tactical example of like how you can set up a way to mine stories, right, from your customers. And then you talked about ideation. So it's like, as marketers, they're content buckets, content pillars. This is how those things then get like bucketed and filtered. And then, the QC process, obviously in larger organizations that we deal with, there's layers. I'd love to say, oh, we don't have to pay attention to legal and we don't have to pay attention to that. But that's just not the reality for financial clients, pharmaceutical clients, legal clients. Those layers exist. So even for us, when we were thinking about that infrastructure, we had to build like this feedback. We had to build a live feedback component where a global team across the world could be watching that cast as it's happening, saying, strike that. This has to go now, because of the reputation management. So in order to even like adopt this live mindset or field, there are layers like on the B2B side that I see that have had to be built in to achieve what you're saying. But when they work, man, it becomes this content engine that just helps the company articulate their value, help people more, bring more human centricity to their brand and to their product in a way that is so valuable.
Yeah.
And you talk a lot about that, like just being human first in your interaction. So tell me a little bit about just your, how you approach media hosting, media training through a human first kind of mindset.
Yeah, I always I always have this one exercise I typically do with people who, when I have time to actually sit with them, right? So I did a workshop a while back it was a conference for fitness professionals and entrepreneurs and what have you. And I think in the fitness industry specifically, wellness industry, you tend to have a little bit more, for the most part, extroverted people. Like if you have people that are trainers and they're kind of used to some sort of like people engagement, right?
Yeah.
But there was one girl I remember at the workshop. So whenever I would ask questions and stuff, there was always like participation, but it's just like any class, right? I found the Ray in the classroom.
Okay,
I was like, I hope she doesn't call on me. Please don't talk to me. And so I noticed that like the same people were answering the questions in this. And there was one lady, so we were getting ready to do like mock interviews, and I had the same people want to volunteer for it, and she was just kind of quiet in the corner waiting. Like I could tell, like when I was like, oh, who liked it? And she kind of literally hid herself. And then I was like, ew. I was like, this one, yes, come up here. Like I wanna practice this mock interview. Let's use you as an example, a prime example, right? And her name was Annie. And so she got up there and she was like, hi. And I was like, hey, Annie. She was like, hello. I was like, I'm like, Annie, you okay? Like, and so when we were starting, I could tell she was like, God, please, like, I don't want to do this. And I was like, look, I was like, I want you. I was like, I had to ask her, I was like, are you comfortable? You're not comfortable? And she was like, no, I don't like this. I'm passionate about what I do, but it's hard for me to open up or do this. And I was like, you know what? Okay. So let's do this. I get it. I called you up. I'm putting the spotlight on Annie. You know what? Let's put Annie in the back seat for a minute. I was like, can you do any accents? And the way her face turned red, first of all, when I said that, because she was like, where is she taking me right now? And I was like, any, and she was like, no, I don't do accents. I don't do any of that. And I was like, okay. I was like, we're in Scottsdale, Arizona, by the way. So I was like, do you know what a Valley girl sounds like? And I was like, who here knows what a Valley girl? Everybody was like nodding their head. I was like, you know what a Valley girl sounds like, right? And she was like, yeah, I know. I was like, okay. So forget Annie. You're Becca. Okay. You're Becca from the Valley. And I was like, so I want you to do this interview as Becca from the Valley. I don't want to see or hear from Annie the rest of this interview. Okay. And then, and she was like, okay. I was like, I'm sorry, Becca, what was that? And she was like, okay. And and I was like, all right, everybody like loved this. Like you could just feel the room just shift and was like, all right, we're in. And we start doing the interview and I start asking her questions about her business. It's funny because as she's at first when she's answering it, she's like trying to maintain this voice, right? And I was like, so what do you do? Why do you do what you do? Like what inspired you to do it? And she's sitting there. It was like what I wanted to do for like ever. And she was so focused on trying to be a Valley girl, right? And then eventually I asked her another question and then another question. And soon she couldn't even maintain her Valley girl anymore. And then I caught her a couple of times. I was like, nope, you're being Annie. I need Becca. And then by the end of it, we stopped and I was like, do you see how hard it is for you to be somebody else? It's actually easier for you to be yourself in an interview than it is to be anyone else. So if it's difficult for you to be yourself, try being, and I kid you not, try being someone else in the practice, the interview, practice talking as someone else, and watch how naturally your body, your biology pulls you back to you, your natural cadence, your natural voice, your vocabulary. And that's the biggest thing I feel like when it comes to really making sure that who you are is coming through and highlighting your subject matter experts or who they are. But I think that's a big component of it, right? You want to be able to allow someone to let who they are come through. And most of the time we're just overthinking it so much that it's like being super self-conscious, right? It's like having a mirror this close to you and suddenly you can see everything. And when you step back, you realize that the most natural thing you have is just being yourself.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's just, I took acting classes when I was younger. It's one of the best things I think I did, more not to act as someone else, but learn how to tap into certain emotions, because I would see myself back on screen. I was like, I thought I was smiling there. I really wasn't, So if anything, I think also it's good for people to see themselves on camera.
Yes.
It really is. You talked about, singing when you're growing up. It's like you need to hear the playback a little bit sometimes,
Before you go pursuing that as a career, you need to hear this playback.
Exactly. So I would say, man, just start. Even if you don't publish a lot of the content, just put up your iPhone and start getting comfortable with yourself. Yeah. And that's what acting class did for me, as well as I did some media training as well. And it's really, to be a great actor, like you have to, they call it star appeal when they see it in kids, but it's just these kids are really in touch with their identity. Yeah. They know themselves and they're so comfortable with themselves. And I think they get that early on. They're like, that's star appeal. They have removed any ounce of corporate theater from their souls and they're just like pure. And we're like, you're a star. No, they're a person. They're just themselves. They're untainted by the world. It's okay. Yeah, so I
100%. I love that exercise. And what I heard in that is give people the permission to just like be.
Yes.
And I think that exercise, even just hearing everyone laugh in the room, helps take your mind away from, oh God, what if they laugh at me, for example, or whatever like preconceived fears you have in your head of like, what's the worst that could happen?
Yeah.
I always like go back to this example. The first like keynote or speaking engagement I had was a crowd of 200. It was the most people I had ever had. And I was on stage and I am not formally media trained. I wore a dress on stage and my mic went out and there was not a backup mic. So I had to so literally my worst fear is happening. Like my mic has gone out. This is the biggest crowd I've ever done. And now they're going to have to go behind my dress on stage as I'm talking to fix this issue. So it's literally like my worst fear happening. Yeah. And the only thing that helped in that moment was just leaning into how awkward the entire thing was. And I feel like that's what comedians do so well. And they've tapped into is like, let me just pick up the things that you're going to pick up about me or that you're already, and just be giving yourself permission to be. If you are a dork, be a dork.
Yes.
If you like, for me, it's Harry Potter. If you see my Gryffindor scarf, mind your business. That is me, right? That is who I am. So if you're loud or you're rambunctious or you're energetic or whatever that is, or if you're dry, like dry eyes, like just be that person, because it's so much harder to be someone else. And it'll help you get out of that comparison or those fears or all those ideas that get just like trapped and tangled in here that are preventing you. So that exercise really just kicks people out of doing that. And, one of the things that I've noticed with speakers too, that you have to be really conscious about is not all people operate at certain times. You have your morning people, you have your night owls, you have the people who you better feed them before you put them on a camera. And just being really conscious of like the environment that you've created for someone to show up and be. If they're going to be themselves, then maybe showing up in a black hoodie with your logo on it is the best you're going to get out of them. Maybe they are someone who likes to be suited and booted, but like there are so many layers to letting someone be.
100%. What you just said is something that I have stressed so often. And I used to see, and no offense to the PR people out there, please don't come for me.
We love you, PR people.
I know. But when I see PR people that push the polish, which is a weird thing to push, and I get it. Yeah. And sometimes it's also coming from the client. It's not necessarily coming, or the PR person has diligently tried. But where I remember someone asked, they had booked them in, for an interview on our show, and they're like, "Oh, what should I wear?" And I was like, "Please wear what makes you comfortable. Do not dress for the audience. I need you to dress for the interview, not the audience." So if you're coming to talk to me about your wellness and fitness business, and when you are in your element, you're usually in your Lululemons, please wear that. Don't come here trying to match me. You know what I mean? You have to think of the fact that you are bringing your world to the audience and who you are. No one's going to go, why? Now, granted, if you're in your pajamas, listen, if that's who you are, that's who you are. Like,
if that's your brand,
that's your brand. As long as it's the true version of you that is the one you want to lead with, right? Like, for me, I feel better when I'm dressed up. That's where do you pull your empowerment from? Is it from comfort? Is it from suiting up? Is it from looking good? Is it from look? That is where you will show up the best, right? And I think that you hit such an important point, because the other thing is there is a responsibility to curate an environment. There's a reason why I think that saying of like the green M&Ms, the people who need like certain things and they have high requirements and this and that in order to get into their space of comfort. There is a truth to this. You should have a ritual that brings you into your sense of self, that grounds you, and so you can eliminate the internal chatter, right? And I know you talked about acting classes. Improv classes are by far an addition to this. Acting classes and improv classes are phenomenal in engaging that like yes and, because this is what tends to happen is people they forget they're human, and that things, like it's like they're on stage or they're on set or this, and something crazy happens, and instead of like leaning into it, they get that deer in headlights thing, like, oh God, people can see me and I don't know what to do. There's no pause button. We can't take two. And that's where improv comes into play. But I love the fact that you already instinctively, see me be human.
Yeah.
Like you just, and it immediately creates a connection and you become relatable.
100%. You've talked in the past about like how those like pieces of affinity that you sometimes bring to yourself are really a really strong like tool that you have. Just in terms of like what you put on your set, what you wear, etc. Tell me a little bit more about that, and just how when you're advising clients, you kind of talk through those pieces and why they're important or how you use them.
Yeah. So now we're getting into more of like the design of a set. I know people are thinking like, okay, brand colors, chair, table. Okay, got it. And then you'll put a shelf in the background, maybe with some things from your company on it, maybe with some plants, but the set design is so important these days because Google now has eyes. So Google is called Google Lens. You can test it out yourself. You could upload any picture. Even if you're like shopping, it does it. So the same technology you would use to upload a photo into like your Google search bar, is the same technology that YouTube is using to scan your video. So people used to try all these little hacks and put certain things in the title and certain things in the metadata and to try to trick the algorithm.
Yes.
But now Google doesn't care really anything about that. It does make up as far as like human seeing a title and clicking that title, but Google is scanning the video and it's listening. It also has ears. So it listens to the video and then it also watches the video to determine. And there was a study done where I think they put all cats in a video, but they titled it like dogs, and just to see how it would show up in the algorithm. And the cats actually, it showed up alongside other cat videos. Even though it was titled and they tried to trick it and everything, Google is listening and it's watching your video now. And with AI, that's going to intensify. So the things that you have in your background and what you wear are helping to build affinity. I call them like an affinity shelf. Even the cap. So we talked about on the last episode, borrowing someone's authority. You can borrow the Houston Astros authority. I'm sorry about, Dallas. But you can borrow, you're borrowing authority. So even though you're in a corporate setting, it's okay because that establishes trust, that establishes affinity with a brand who's already spent billions to build that.
Yeah.
So the stuff that you put in your background, because we're watching with the sound off. So we're trying to internalize, like, what is this video about?
Yeah.
So if it's, let's say, helicopters, you might want some helicopters in the back in your background somewhere, things like that, so that there's some type of association. But also just taking Google out of this, just the human affinity that is built with, okay, I feel like I know that person's from Houston. Now it's this person I can trust them a little bit more. So
for sure. Yeah. And you're doubling down on kind of one thing that I really, really think is so important, especially when you're thinking about media today. And that's that algorithmically platforms have moved from followership to relevance, meaning it's no longer who follows me necessarily, but like who is interested in what I'm talking about and who is doubling down because they're interested in engaging with that. So the engagement conversation is huge currently, right? Because you'll see people, we see it all the time on LinkedIn. I have hundreds of thousands of followers and your videos or your content get 5 clicks. And it's because you're algorithmically not showing up the same way you were before because it's moved to more relevance. Is this relevant to what I, as a person who's coming to this platform, am searching for? I'm searching for recruiters, or I'm searching for video production, or I'm searching for podcasts, whatever that is. You're not showing up if you're not deemed relevant. Who you cultivated before doesn't matter. What matters is whether people are engaging with you. Are they clicking? Are they stopping to actually listen through, even if the sound is off? So we're talking about all these different little pieces, but it really is about how are people engaging with you. So what does it mean to create, how do you foster that engagement online, that community online? You're putting out content. I've created my newsroom. I've now got my content engine going. I've got my team. I'm putting this out. How am I measuring my engagement, and how am I creating engagement with that community and those people, those humans I'm focused on, hopefully?
Yeah. I'm curious because you guys, I know you talked about the set design, because naturally my mind goes, okay, so how do you advise someone? Because I know that people don't really think about that. They just think the set needs to look good, but they don't think about how it should speak to the content itself and how the environment matters, right? So so when you get somebody that's like, no, I want this big, neon sign behind me that, or what have you, or what about when you talked about relevance and how relevant you are? I think it's difficult. For me, I always talk about you want to dress for what you want, right? But what happens when you as a producer get someone who you're like, this is really where you want to go. This is the content. This is what would speak to the audience. But then they're like, no, I want to talk about this, or I want to talk about a bunch of different things. You know what I mean? How do you hone them in, or what should those people be thinking about to kind of keep them in that line of thought?
I think people go, there is something about going broader that sometimes makes people think they're going to be more successful. And that is, to me, a mistake, because you could be talking to everyone, and because of that, you're talking to no one very deeply. Yeah. You're trying to be everything to everyone instead of being the thing that you're most passionate at better than anyone on the planet. And so for our clients specifically, oftentimes they already are in really niche industries. So this tends to not be an issue in terms of what they want to talk about. However, when it comes to naming something or what it should look like, they always want to go broader. And, in B2B is just different than B2C. In B2B, you don't need to be Joe Rogan or, Diary of a CEO with millions and millions of listeners. You need 100 to 1,000 of the right people, because that industry is so specialized and that the networks effects of B2B are different. So I think that's the biggest kind of mistake I think we see on this side of it when you're looking to engage people. You think broader means I'm going to get better results, and it doesn't. That engagement drops because maybe you're not able to speak as deeply. You're not able to use phrases or affinity items or whatever it is that actually tells that audience at face value, this is for me. This was created for me. So I often say, when we have that type of situation, I'm always willing to test it out. Like, let's see it through. We come in and we agreed that this was the audience. We always call ourselves the champions of the audience at Speaker Box. So we're in agreement. This is who we're serving, right? So cool. Let's test it. Let's try this thumbnail. Let's A/B test the way this looks. Let's A/B test this series or this title. And let's let the data tell us if this is for who we think it's for, or what, showed better results.
Yeah.
Don't let it be about me. Don't let it be about you. Don't let it be about what we want, but keeping humans and our audience specifically front and center. They're the decision makers. That's how you'll continue to win, I think, at this space.
Yeah, I think I'm just so big on like simplicity when it comes to marketing. And there's this quote, so I'm going to pull it up and read it because it's like a part of our ethos, but it's by Steve Jobs. He says, marketing is about values. It is a very complicated and noisy world. We're not going to get a chance to get people to remember much about us. No company is. So we have to be really clear on what we want them to know about us. So when you look at a company like Apple or even Nike, the simplicity in their messaging, I mean, sometimes you'll see their billboards and it's just like 3 words. And it's like, just do it. That means so much to so many people, whereas you could make a paragraph out of that. So simplicity is extremely important, and segmentation of an audience is also very important. You'll see that if you ever start spending some money on ads or real marketing and landing pages, you'll see if you message directly to one segmentation, you'll really start to dial in your messaging and talk to that person like no one else can. But the broader you go in your messaging, the more diluted you make it.
Yeah.
And it starts to sound like everyone else. So the big thing is cut through the noise. You cannot do it with a very dull axe.
Yeah.
I like to say light can cut through steel when it's focused. If you can focus the light, if you can focus your message, you will start to cut through the noise.
Yeah.
But so many people are afraid to do that because they're like, that's going to limit me.
Yes.
No, you're going to actually cut through everything everyone else is saying to a broad audience, and you're going to be speaking to an audience of one, and your message is going to be amplified because it's so narrow and sharp.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like as you're describing it to me, what that sounds like is like the difference between literally sitting in the chair next to the person in their house talking to them versus kind of walking by with a microphone outside their house.
That's right.
Like, do you want to be that, or do you want to be the person that's in there going, hey, you should know about me? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and I think it really is like I in a weird way, it changes into a whisper where you have someone's attention and they can and they're actively listening to you. Yeah. I also think it's a lot in like you said, the simplicity. And I think that's where the journalists also really come in, because you have people that say, we help you expand your visibility across all networks and this, and it's like the most LinkedIn sounding.
Yeah.
Like, and
You're good at all those things?
Yeah.
You mean we help you get seen by who you want to be seen by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boom.
Right.
And
right.
it's like, oh, instantly,
yeah,
I want to talk to you.
Right.
Instantly I need more of what you're doing. Just tell me. And it's like the way I look at it is like, well, how would you talk to someone like if you met them at the bus stop or on an elevator? But like, give me actual conversation. Don't talk to me through this corporate formal speak, because no one talks like that.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think even we've gotten to a point where we're developing a keen ear around what AI sounds like. And AI sounds conversational. And yet there's still something about it that's not completely authentic.
Yeah.
Right. And so because of that, now it's going to get better. It's going to keep improving, right? Which means that we're going to have to force or up our humanity, our humanness, if you will, right? And if the more that we do that, it's going to require a much stronger sense of self, and that applies to brands. That sense of self and thinking in that way is no longer kind of like what I consider like the self-help industry, or like that woo-woo type stuff where it's like thinking about yourself in a true way, because that's where the connection is going to happen to audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And this all ties back so well to the distribution nature of your newsroom, because you got to start with the end in mind, or, putting your distribution first is always where you need to start. Like, where is this going to end up, in whose hands, and what is that demographic of that particular distribution channel that we're going to be distributing to? Because that's going to inform how you structure everything else. So you got to think about where you're going before you take off, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I can't speak to this more, like the importance of understanding where those people live, where they spend their time online, where they get their news from, where they consume their news. Do they do it on runs? Do they do it like what are these people experiencing when they're consuming this, and making sure that you're delivering your content, message, etc. in a native way to that platform, like a platform native way. So taking what you did on LinkedIn and posting it directly to Instagram or directly to TikTok or to your website, that does not work. And it does not work for a reason, because the rules of those different platforms are different. Yep. Certain things, your G2 reviews will not fly on Reddit. People will eat you alive and tell you that you are from the company. And it's so important to know in your distribution plan, again, what your audience expects, and then what those are in terms of where they get their media from, but also what those platforms, how they operate, and how natively content is consumed on them. Because otherwise, you definitely will get the feedback you're looking for.
Yes,
and maybe not in the best way. And so, I think we've touched on so many different things here, but wrapping this up, the most important thing is one, understanding who you're talking to, yes. But I think the other piece of that is understanding your messengers and the power like that they have, and helping push that story forward in a really impactful, authentic, human way that is magnetic, or in not doing that because they're not interested and because they're out on what you've brought to the table for them. And so neither of those things, it's all up for speculation, and you have to find what works for your brand or your company most. So when you're thinking about the newsroom, we've given you a lot to think about here. Yep. And so that's it for this episode of Owned and Earned. Thank you guys so much for the great combo today.